Hey everyone, this is part 2 of 2 on final walkthroughs. This one is focused on sellers. So sellers, it's pretty easy. I always say to my sellers, leave the home in the same condition that you would want it left for you, right? So clean the house. We have a phrase called broom swept condition. That means that you don't have to get down and dirty and clean, but it should be broom swept. I do have some sellers that go above and beyond the call of duty, and they have it either professionally cleaned or they do a really good job at the end, and everyone appreciates that, believe me. But clean the house, get all of your stuff out. This sounds obvious, right? But so many people leave things behind. They leave junk that they don't want to deal with behind for the buyer. Sometimes they feel like out of the goodness of their heart, they're leaving them things they might use, but sometimes it ends up being just junk for the buyer to deal with. So I always recommend to sellers, err on the side of caution, make sure everything is cleaned out. If you have some things that you think might be useful, brooms, rakes, snow shovels, things that a new buyer might actually need, ask in advance. Come up with a little list of things that you want to leave behind and send it over to the buyer's side and ask in advance, is it okay if we leave these things in the garage for you? Do you already have these things or will you find them useful? And 9 times out of 10, the buyers will say, oh my gosh, thank you so much, that'd be great. But every once in a while, you'll have a buyer that says, no, just get rid of it, I've got all my own things. So you want to know that stuff in advance. You know, no one should walk into a final walkthrough with a whole bunch of stuff that was left that they now have to deal with. Okay, so that's number one. There are some things that really do need to stay in the property, and a lot of times sellers don't know this. So listing agents need to be very diligent and tell their sellers what needs to stay and what needs to go. So the things that need to stay are obviously the appliances that were included in the purchase. You want to double check that contract and make sure about the washer and the dryer, if there's a dehumidifier that was negotiated, if there's a deep freezer or an extra refrigerator in the garage. All of those things need to be sure to either stay in the property if they were written into the contract or get moved out if they were not included in the contract. The other things that sometimes people don't know about are TV mounts. So TV mounts are screwed into the wall. Do not remove those from the wall. They're part of the property now. Same thing goes with light fixtures. Anything that is screwed into the walls, shelving units, hooks, things like that, those stay with the property. Curtain rods, those things stay with the property. The curtains themselves can go, but the curtain rod will stay. Blinds are screwed into the property. They will stay with the property. Anything else should go. The other thing that can stay and is actually helpful is any materials that were used in the home. For example, let's say you just did a new tile floor in the bathroom and you've got some extra tile that was left behind. That could stay in the property because it kind of belongs with the house. And let's say that the new owner ends up cracking a tile, they can then replace that tile with something that you've left behind. Same thing with extra hardwood flooring or laminate flooring that you have from a project. That would be helpful if it stayed so that the buyer can then replace flooring if needed. The other thing that can be helpful is paint. If it's the current color that you have on your walls and you have extra, and I'm talking like a good half gallon or more extra. If it's a little bit in the bottom of the paint can, don't leave that behind. That can be looked at as like a pain in the butt to get rid of. There are environmentally conscious ways to get rid of paint, which you can find online, in which case you should get rid of your own paint if it's less than 1/3 of a can, I think it is. But if it's a good amount of paint, and it's a neutral color or it's something that you just painted on the walls and you feel like the buyer could possibly use it, mark the paint, with the date, the room that you painted that color, leave it for them, and that will stay in the property, and that's actually helpful if they need to touch up little holes or something like that. So those are helpful things. Everything else, all your personal belongings must go. Your meter reads, I said it in the last video, but the seller takes their meter reads, the buyer takes theirs. You call them into the utility companies to have them transferred. Sellers, If you take one thing from this video, please do not turn off service. You must transfer service to the buyer. Unfortunately, I have seen this happen when a seller either doesn't remember or an agent forgets to tell the seller, don't turn off the service, and the seller has it turned off. It's a huge pain for the buyer to get that service restored. It costs money, and closing is delayed because of it. So that's a huge tip. Please do not turn off your utilities. Have them transferred over. Okay. And lastly, if you really want to get a gold star and you want the buyer to have like above and beyond, awesome experience at the final walkthrough, leave them a little note behind. I've seen sellers leave a little note behind that tells them about the garbage service that they used, or the person that mowed their lawn or did their snow plowing. If there's a handyman that lives in the neighborhood, let the buyer know. That's just so thoughtful for a seller to give over to the new buyer, and it just makes their experience that much better. Again, think about the way that you would want the property left for you. I've seen some sellers leave a nice note in a bottle of wine. That's like above and beyond the call of duty, but buyers really, really appreciate it. So if you really want to have a very smooth closing with no problems and no last minute, negotiations, make sure you talk to your listing agent about the condition that the property needs to be left in, and do a really good and thorough job. As a listing agent myself, I try to make a point to go to every single listing before the buyer's final walkthrough so I can walk through it myself, just to double check to make sure everything is okay. Because I don't want to deal with a whole lot of problems at the end, and I know my sellers, the last thing they want is issues at the end. Okay, if you have any other questions, please reach out. Be happy to help. Bye.